everybody. Tuning in to Tricky Kid TV. Welcome. This week, on the heels of the brand new album, Book of Bad Decisions, we have the vocalist Neil Fallon from Clutch. Welcome, Neil.
Howdy. Thank you for having me.
Decisions has to be the most Clutch-sounding album yet.
Well, it's good to hear. Naming a record is always a hand-wringing exercise for us. It never really comes easy. And I think we were reluctant to name it after one of the songs because it always puts that song on a mantle.
Right, right.
But after thinking about it, it's not a concept record by any means, but having the word book in it kind of implies that each song is its own chapter.
Sure.
There's no arcing plot to it, but that was it. And recording it was we just wanted to make as many good songs as we could.
Right.
And it's been the same for 25 years, how we write music.
Right. Now, I remember one thing that has changed a little bit, I guess, would be in terms of, I don't know if aesthetic is the right word. I can remember a while back, you were doing a radio appearance, and we were being taken to the rock radio station, and then now they have the little marquee in the hallway where it says, which station is which, and there was a blues station, and I remember you telling me, you were saying, one of these days I want to be going to that station to be interviewed. Are we there yet?
I'm not real sure. I mean, the luxury of hindsight, say I'm very happy with what we have now.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, and I was probably guilty of this too, starting out, there's this idea of there's a moment where you've made it.
Right.
That doesn't really ever happen.
Yeah.
It's everything is its own lesson. Life is about learning and trying new things, and there's no final destination where you wake up and you say, oh, okay, now I can relax.
That's right.
That's called death.
Right.
There are feast and famines when it comes to inspiration, but you got to work at it. And if there's anything that defines success for me, it's that this is my only gig. Most musicians I know, when they go off tour, have to get another job to make ends meet doing tours, and we're, knock on wood, not in that position anymore. I mean, I did that for years.
Yeah.
For performing it.
Right.
Count me in.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you can get lazy because of that. I mean, I think so. Most people in the creative arts have to relegate it to after hours or on the weekend or what have you, and you have to hope that inspiration comes. But when you have the luxury of not having that looming over your head, you can always keep putting it off and procrastinating, and that's not good.
That's true too.
You got to work at it.
Yeah.
And you got to be afraid to write some garbage.
Well, there doesn't seem to be any lack of inspiration on this new record. One thing I think was kind of cool, kind of the connection to the blues we were talking about, is that one of my favorite things about blues records is there's always seems to be a female character or some sort of female that kind of is inspiring the blues or the agony or whatever it is. There's I've noticed a lot of female characters in a lot of your writing over the last couple of records. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think it goes back many years, probably to adolescence when I was obsessed with Heavy Metal magazine, and I've always liked the strong female ass kicker character. I mean, for example, you have it in Cypress Grove or Cyborg Betty.
Right.
In this case, we have Barbarella.
Yeah.
And I know my lyrics. I look at them as being completely fictional. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I married the best woman in the world, so there's not a lot of emotional heartbreak to share with people. It would be disingenuous. But I think putting characters, whether real or imagined, into a song, it gives it its own life.
Right, sure.
And I think I didn't do it initially because I didn't want it to come across as being, sexist or treating women in a kind of, materialistic way.
Sure.
I wanted those characters to be strong and powerful, and hopefully that's the vibe that's come across. Believe me, if I wrote something stupid, my wife would let me know.
That's awesome. You're obviously very well read. When you think about creating a female character or drawing from one, what talk about some of the references that you feel that you've drawn upon for that?
That's a good question. I mean, I read a lot of science fiction.
Yeah.
And Cormac McCarthy is also one of my favorite authors too.
Nice.
which to me, sometimes he goes, you could easily put some of his works in the horror section because they're so terrifying.
And freaking, yeah, totally, yeah.
And I think that was kind of the vibe I was going for with the lyrics from the song Book of Bad Decisions, because in a lot of his scenarios, something bad has happened, but you're not really clear what or why. It's just that you're presented with the aftermath of something. And, I, of course, have a male voice, so when I don't mention the woman's name, but when it's kind of implied that when she answers the phone, that I'm speaking to a woman. And I like the mystery of it. You don't want to give away everything. The listener has to be able to put his or her own spin on it.
Right.
And I think, obviously Barbarella's from the movie. I mean, it's a terrible movie, but it's also great in its being terrible.
Like what is it, Flash Gordon?
Yes, there's plenty of them. But I've always been a sucker for sci-fi shtick and kitschiness. And Emily Dickinson is probably the opposite of that. And it has also to do with our time when the band lived in a farmhouse that was built in 1780. That's where we wrote The Elephant Riders. And I always kind of had this vision of driving up to the driveway and seeing a Victorian woman in the attic window. I mean, I never did, but your mind just starts daydreaming. And to me, she just, even though we were in West Virginia, she's from Massachusetts, I think she kind of, the name recognition of her is instant, and she kind of really embodies the spirit of the age, or the zeitgeist, or whatever you want to call it, of that time.
I can see the McCormick influence now that you mentioned it, because that kind of fill in a little bit.
I think the hardest and at the same time most rewarding thing about writing lyrics is when I listen to the music instrumentally. Like most people, certain images just come to mind, and there's no rhyme or reason why.
Right.
When I heard Tim's riff for Emily Dickinson, it sounded very pastoral and kind of rural to me. I wasn't going to write that was been inappropriate, and sometimes inappropriate for something like Barbarella.
Right.
And the song Lorelei, I think sometimes it's important to let meter and rhyme guide you to your final destination. That song started out, I wanted to write a song about a shogun named Marcus and his sunset years.
Okay.
And I was looking for a rhyme for samurai.
Okay.
And I stumbled upon Lorelei, and I kind of knew what that was, but I looked it up and I said, oh, wait a minute. This character is much more appropriate for the mood of this song. Marcus is sort of a humorous character, and that's not a humorous song.
Right.
So I abandoned that idea, and then it kind of made instant sense.
Okay. Okay.
And I think that's the fun part about writing lyrics, is when you end up with something on the page you had no intention of. Visual artists kind of talking about canvases or stone in a similar way, where it's already in there. It's your job to discover it.
Potential sequels to some of the characters and some of the stories. I know there's a Big News 3 out there. I've heard it.
Yeah, that was a weird one. It was it was basically a demo.
Yeah.
And it kind of died on the vine. The Barbarella, I see that as the third part to. I've always considered X-Ray Visions and Firebirds as part 1 and 2.
Okay.
And now this character who's years on relating this episode to his son.
Okay.
Who's now probably, getting into adolescence, and he needs to give fatherly advice that if you're going to pick up hitchhikers, actually don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Your own experiences now as being a father.
Yeah, I think I was foolish for many years, thinking that once I became a parent, my creative life would come screeching to a halt.
Yeah, until I felt too.
Because it's like, it's a kind of a myth that like you're going to be miserable.
Yeah.
You're going to get fat. You're going to lose your hair. You're going to sit in front, but nothing about that came to be. And I think the job of having to explain the world to someone who knows nothing is the most intellectually engaging thing you can imagine, because we all take stuff for granted.
Right, that's right.
And now having to constantly answer questions as best you can is a good exercise for the brain. Sometimes you have to lie, but that's part of the fun too.
For sure. I love what you'd mentioned about maybe some sequels and stuff and bringing some stuff back. I did notice this. This will kind of fit all of that. You mentioned about being in the house where Elephant Riders was recorded. You mentioned Lorelei. You mentioned about again, bringing back different characters, I couldn't help but notice on the record there seems to be some callback to some of those things. Number one that I wrote down was you guys used to play a song called "Hot Off the Grill." It was a live song that never became, or at least that I know of, didn't become recorded. Ghoul Wrangler, you say "Hot Off the Grill" in it. Is that the same song? That was what it became?
Occurred to me until just now.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. But you know what? Those things do happen subconsciously.
For sure, yeah.
I've always been wary of nostalgia. I always thought nostalgia kind of smacked of giving up and not looking forward to the future. But there comes a point where we're doing this for 25 years. There's tons of stories that are just still sitting on the shelf here. Going back to Lorelei, that there's a reference to the Elephant Riders.
That's right.
And that's probably an artifact of when I was. There was another song idea that I had where it was, okay, let's say the Civil War's over, and this elephant who was this heroic war beast now has to get whipped into a cage. Its only gig is with a Barnum and Bailey. Yeah. Very. And I started thinking, wow, that's really a bummer. So I abandoned that idea, but I think that artifact kind of stuck around.
For sure. I think I see what you're saying. It's kind of a bummer, but still kind of a cool idea.
Yeah, it's something that would probably be better in a book than in a song. You can only take so many bum outs.
It's funny. We had, the filmmaker Richard Linklater. You've probably seen some of his stuff. You probably saw.
But I'm terrible with names of directors.
He did Dazed and Confused.
Okay. I've seen that.
Did you see Boyhood? It was something he kind of did this kind of neat project.
No, but I've heard about it. I don't know what it is though.
It's pretty cool. It's something that he shot over 12 years with the same actors. So when you're watching, it's like watching time lapse release stuff. Well, we had his daughter on the show, and her name is Lorelei.
Oh, wow.
And so I had to pick a song of the week. I was like, well, this works out.
How did she like it?
This works out well. I think she liked it because it had her name in it.
Okay. Fair enough.
How's that? So I said around that time, because I'm glad you have a healthy attitude about that too, because you have a new album. This is all about moving forward. It's not a nostalgic trip like you said, but like you said, it is sometimes to kind of look back on a few different things. And the first single called "Give Me the Keys" recalls back to a fun, or maybe not so fun memory. What made you draw upon that now?
Well, I think I've always had it in my head that would be a good subject to write about.
Yeah.
And I was just waiting for the song to say, oh, this is a good spot for it.
Okay.
And I took plenty of poetic license with it, but it's good to have memories of your terrible first tour to appreciate the one you're on.
For sure.
Now.
I remember mine, for sure.
And, that was, I swore until I was blue in the face I would never set foot in the state of Kansas again. We've been back hundreds of times.
Right.
It's great. We have awesome shows in Wichita and Lawrence. And
to our fans in Kansas.
Yeah. So, but it's these things happen out on the road, but much more frequently when you're in a van, because you're interacting with the world much more, and there was no cell phones back there.
Yeah.
You're looking at maps and pulling over at truck stops to make phone calls, and nowadays it's much easier to be insulated. And I do miss that aspect of it, but I also like being able to sleep.
How'd you guys meet Mike and start working with him? He's a great dude.
Yeah, Mike's awesome.
Yeah.
He's a beast. He's one of the hardest working musicians I've ever encountered.
Totally.
I mean, he does he's probably doing a gig right now in New Orleans, and then getting on a plane to play with Galactic in Colorado.
Right.
That's how he does. But if memory serves, I think what happened is John Paul and someone else, maybe Dan and one of our crew guys years ago, went to the Maple Leaf just to see what was going on.
Okay.
And Mike was in there doing his thing. There was no one in the Maple Leaf. It was empty, and he was using an empty water bottle and crushing it into the microphone as a percussion piece.
Awesome.
And I guess they spoke after the gig, and I think that's how it started, really.
Yeah.
Just going to a show, and we've toured with his band. He's played on our record. He did the vibes on Lorelei and lots of percussion.
And I think the last time I saw you guys, I think he came up on the Primus tour, didn't he? He got up and did a couple of songs.
Yeah, it's quite possible.
Yeah.
He shows up in very unexpected places.
You don't find him; he finds you, right?
Pretty much.
When did you start to become aware of almost that brand loyalty in a sense?
It took a while, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, there was many years which I was thinking, well, we'll probably do this for another year, because the 90s, you know, there was a lot of money being thrown around. We got a lot of tour support.
Yeah.
We weren't selling many records, and when you get to a point and the idea of family comes in, and you got to ask yourself, am I going to be able to support a family doing this?
That's right.
And we decided to go all in and, you know, get back in the van after being in tour buses for years. And we basically started over in the year 2000.
Okay.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, okay.
And, so there were 7 years behind us at that point, and I think it was then that I started realizing it, and it was particularly when we launched our own record label. And the idea is not a record label that's going to sign tons of bands. It's just a way to deliver it to people. And the internet was a BFD for us because people were suddenly able to hear the band for the first time.
Yeah, yeah.
And our shows got much bigger.
Yeah.
And that was sort of like part two of this band's career. You know, it's like, I think when we did Self-Titled, it kind of set us off on a trajectory.
For sure.
And things got, you know, a little bit, you know, and earlier I said feast or famine. That was the famine part.
Right, right.
They were around 99, 2000. And then that record put a lot of wind in our sails again.
So their introduction actually was Blast Tyrant. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like a band free. It feels like freedom.
Yeah.
It sounds like freedom.
Music is, you know, about self-discovery sometimes. And I think one of the advantages we've had is, as a band, we never said we want to be like this, and that,
right.
and not this, or that. We just kind of just throw stuff over the fence to see where it lands. You know, when we went to court with DRT, and got that master back along with two others, we're like, why would we do this again with another record label? Let's just put it out there. And that was a game changer for us. Finally accepted the idea that this is what I do. This is what I will be remembered for, and the same can be said for Tim, Dan, and John Paul. It was pretty liberating.
Yeah.
Instead of being afraid of when is this going to become crashing to a halt. You know, there's years where I took it for granted, you know, because graduated from college and 5 days later I was on a European tour and haven't stopped since, and I assumed that was normal, and I realized it's not. It's very rare to be able to do this for a living, and the older I get, the more protective I am of it, and the more rewarding it is.
Yeah.
And it's to be able to do something creative is wonderful.
It's a gift, right?
I would be a miserable man if I.
Are you familiar with the band King's X? Do you know who? Okay, I want to play something real fast if you don't mind.
They come out to our gigs in Jersey.
I have a long, fun working history with the band Clutch, and kind of worked with a side project of theirs for a while. And
I love that band. It's like when I got turned on to them, they had so many records out. I don't have a favorite record or that record that I sat down and went, oh my God, now I'm going to get into them. It's just been too osmosis. I've heard one song here, one song there, seen them live a couple times. And the thing I love about Clutch, the main thing, aside from the simple chords and rhythms that make you want to pick up your guitar and go jam out and have fun. That's so great about them. The riffs are real simple, but they're really clever and cool. And it's a singer. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about, but all I know is when he gets to the chorus, whatever he's saying, I believe him. You know, he's just babbling like a preacher, pointing fingers and strutting around, and he gets to the chorus and says, "You should have listened." And I'm going, "Yeah. Should have listened. I'm listening, man." You know, it was like you don't know what he's talking about, but it's real and it's exciting and it's urgent.
Wait, I'm gonna see him in a few weeks, and I can't wait to tell him that and share that with him.
Cool. I've never met him. I love him. He is my preacher.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very flattering.
So I thought you would enjoy that, because
that's Jerry.
That's Doug the singer.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, I was confused. Yeah.
You know, if you've ever seen them, have you ever seen them perform?
I have not. Actually, no. I think I've heard. We did a festival with them quite some time ago.
Okay.
So I heard them. You know, festivals sometimes logistically it's almost impossible to check out.
That's
all the
right.
bands.
That's right.
That was very flattering.
Well, I thought you would enjoy that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, and because if you've ever seen him or know anything about them, you know, he actually kind of has that very gospel-y kind of, he kind of sings like a preacher. So he's always been kind of my preacher, and he says that you're his.
Wow. I'm speechless for once.
Yeah.
You know, I think I figured out how to sing, and I'm still figuring out how to sing. I took my first vocal lesson like 6 months ago.
Really?
Yeah, and I think it's more of a bid so I can do this every night.
Well, for sure.
I'm not trying to change much, but the first years, I was coming from a hardcore, background where the idea of pitch and melody was commercial.
Yeah,
You're
right,
not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
And then when I realized that you can burn out on that real quick, man, and it's much more once you start trying to hit pitch and have melodies, it's much more taxing on the throat. And I think it's probably, I listen to a lot of blues and R&B, so that's probably what I'm defaulting to. It's not really by choice. It's kind of those are the patterns that were put into my brain early on.
Right. But you also got to take care of it, like you said. You got to protect it. So maybe vocal lessons will
That's the idea.
extend the.
I have to do these really goofy warm-ups every day.
Yeah.
And find some place where people can't hear me.
Yeah, they make fun of you.
It'll be a viral sensation.
Especially with this gang of ball busters for sure.
Yeah. So. Because I want the last show of a tour to be just as good as the first one.
Yeah, he's out of band.
One of the coolest things about Vinny was a great guy, just affable.
Right.
It's just a walking party.
Yeah.
At all times. Just very happy to be there. Total pro.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't get that combination. Sometimes you guy's a great player but a complete jerk. Honestly, one of my fondest memories about the Pantera tours, they had a catering bus, and they had every day on the bays where most bands would put their luggage, they had 2 giant smokers, and their chef would do slow cooked brisket every day, and they let us have it. It was very generous, and it was great. And that was on the Southern Trend to Kill tour, I believe.
Yeah, 97, 98, I believe, yeah.
And that was a great tour for us, and it's my memory is very hazy, to be quite honest. Memories of like someone's, occasional lapse of judgment that linger the most because it's so anomalous, or it's much more exciting to talk about somebody who did something mean or was a complete wreck. But it's the stories of people just doing everyday stuff, like how they greet someone when they walk into a room.
Right.
Do they even acknowledge the other people? That counts for the most.
Totally.
But it doesn't make for a good story.
Yeah.
So
you have to kind of have something kind of sensationalistic.
Yeah. So I could say, every time he walked into a room, it was like, he was happy to be there.
Yeah.
And that counts for a lot.
For sure. Were you somebody else we lost earlier this year was Anthony Bourdain, somebody else who put in a lot of miles and stuff. Were you aware of him and the show, and were you a big fan of his or not?
Absolutely. I know John Paul read his book even before he became this big sensation that he was. I just liked his honesty, and also, and I think you can draw parallels to music. It's like this has been the best education money can buy. You can't learn these things in any school. Meeting people on a real level, like when we go to another country, they may not speak English, or we certainly can't speak their language, but you're not on the tourist route.
Right.
You're seeing people in their natural environment.
That's right.
And we're very fortunate to be able to say that.
Yeah.
And you realize that everybody's the same in a lot of ways. I mean, if you put a bunch of people in a small room with loud music and beer, it's the great leveler.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of cultural differences at that point.
That's right. I always tell people in all my travels, when they always, when I come back home and stuff, they always want to say like, well, what were they like here? What were they like there? I'm like, you know what? I was more amazed about how similar and the things I had in common and the similarities than I did the differences with people.
I think sometimes the differences get run up the flagpole as a defense mechanism.
Right.
Everybody wants the same thing in certain order. You want food and water, shelter, and safety. And once you get that taken care of, then it's like, okay, we want to have a good time while we're here. And it's
and I like how
you see it for real. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, and I like how he went to those places. See, it's okay to go here. You don't have to be afraid of this place. He put in the miles there. Last, anything going on with that at all? Is any other side projects that's happening? I know obviously you're busy with this tour cycle, but
well, not for me, because I know the foreseeable future is this.
Right.
And what downtime I have, I want to spend at home.
Right.
And not do, and then plus, side projects are usually problematic because everyone's geographically scattered.
Right.
And to get me to drive more than 20 miles when I'm not on tour is a tough call. So.
Well, that's what I told you in New York when you guys played that show. I was like, "What are you doing here? Go home! Like you're always on the road, man."
And that was at a time where I, was a brand new parent. Now that I'm even deeper into it, it drives my wife nuts because when I get home, she wants to go out, and I was like, "No, let's stay."
That's right.
So, there's plenty of clutch things for me to do.
Right. I kind of figured that, but I wanted to ask if there was anything else there. Okay, so in the last thing here, and this is from a humorous standpoint, Book of Bad Decisions. Is there anything you want to share? Again, not a blues jam, but like what is something as a bad decision that you have made or that the band has made that you can laugh about now?
Well, I can say, going back to that Pantera tour. We kind of had early on this kind of we were very insular, and when you get in front of a Pantera crowd, often you're looking at a sea of middle fingers.
Yeah.
Yes. It wasn't easy, but you have to do that. That's part of the growing up as a band, and I remember our reaction to that was like, okay, we're not going to try to get you to like our band, so we're going to get you to really hate us. And we would sit on one riff.
Melvin style.
Yeah, for Melvin style. And that's who we were trying to emulate.
Right.
We would sit on that riff for 20 minutes. And then we walk off stage wondering, well, how come they booed us? Well, obviously because we were being jerks.
Right.
But
antagonistic.
That was our, and of course it's easy to be antagonistic when you got a barricade between you.
Right.
I certainly probably wouldn't have done that on the dance floor.
Right.
But,
or with the orange peel, right?
Yeah. So, but you grow up and you learn.
That's right.
And if we could go back, we certainly wouldn't do it. But if you're given the opportunity to open up for a huge band, do your damn best.
That's right.
Don't be a jerk about it.
That's right.
But live and learn.
Well, after again, my man Neil, brother, that's 25 years, man.
Hard to believe.
I know, man. Always a pleasure. Thanks so much for doing this.
Sure, no problem.